What happens when a normally calm talk show conversation suddenly turns tense the moment a guest refuses to play along? What happens when a Hollywood star decides she's not going to smile through a question that clearly bothers her? That's exactly what happened when Alexandra Daddario sat down with the panel, and things quickly went off script. Make sure to subscribe to Final Take Files, and like and comment for more talk show coverage. Audience, applause. Alexandra, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Joy, first of all, congratulations. The new project is getting a lot of attention already. People are talking about your performance. Alexandra, that's really nice to hear. We worked really hard on it. Sunny, before we get into that though, we have to say, the internet always has opinions about everything you do. Audience laughs lightly. Alexandra, that's very true. Sarah, and you've been pretty open about how social media can be intense sometimes. Alexandra, yeah, it can be. I mean, it's part of the job now, right? But I try not to let it get too loud in my head. Joy, well, something interesting happened last week. There was a pretty heated online debate after an interview you did. Alexandra pauses slightly. Alexandra, okay. Joy, some people felt you were being misunderstood. Sunny jumps in. Sunny, and some people felt like maybe you were pushing back harder than they expected. Audience murmurs. Alexandra, I think that's fair. Sometimes people hear one sentence and suddenly there's a whole story built around it. Whoopi, that's the world we live in now. Sarah, but you also addressed it online. You wrote a pretty direct message. Alexandra nods. Alexandra, yeah. I just felt like, if people are going to talk about something I said, they should at least hear the whole context. Sunny, you said, I'm not here to make everyone comfortable. Audience reacts with a small, oh. Alexandra laughs quietly. Alexandra, did I say that? Joy, you did. Alexandra, well, I stand by that. Audience applauds lightly. Whoopi, okay, let's talk about that for a second because that line really caught attention. Sarah, some people loved it. Sunny, and some people thought it sounded a little confrontational. Alexandra leans forward slightly. Alexandra, I don't think honesty should automatically be seen as confrontation. Audience claps again. Joy, fair point. Sunny, but this is where it gets interesting. Because in that same interview you were asked about expectations placed on actresses. Alexandra nods slowly. Alexandra, yes. Sunny, and you said you were tired of being asked certain kinds of questions. Whoopi, which actually brings us to something we wanted to ask you about. Alexandra smiles politely but looks cautious. Alexandra, okay. Sarah, do you ever feel like sometimes when you push back on those questions, people think you're being defensive? Alexandra pauses. Alexandra, I mean, maybe. Audience laughs nervously. Joy, because that's what some critics said. They said you seemed frustrated. Alexandra, well, I was frustrated. Audience laughs lightly. Sunny, why? Alexandra takes a breath. Alexandra, because sometimes it feels like actresses are expected to answer the same 5 questions forever. Whoopi, such as? Alexandra, how do you stay in shape? What's your skincare routine? What's it like being a beautiful actress in Hollywood? Audience murmurs. Alexandra, meanwhile, the men get asked about their process, their craft, their character psychology. Audience applauds louder. Joy nods. Sarah leans forward. Sarah, but some people might say those questions are just part of celebrity culture. Alexandra looks directly at her. Alexandra, sure. But that doesn't mean we have to pretend they're meaningful. Audience reacts again. Whoopi raises eyebrows slightly. Whoopi, okay, that's where the internet started lighting up. Sarah laughs. Sarah, yeah, people had opinions. Joy, because some viewers said, well, you are famous partly because of your looks. Audience goes quiet for a moment. Alexandra tilts her head slightly. Alexandra, that's always an interesting thing to hear. Sunny jumps in quickly. Sunny, I mean, Hollywood is visual. Alexandra, of course it is. Sunny, so isn't that just the reality? Alexandra pauses, clearly choosing her words carefully. Alexandra, there's a difference between acknowledging reality and reducing someone to one thing. Audience applauds again. Whoopi, okay, that's a good distinction. Sarah, but here's where the debate online really started. Some viewers said, if you don't like the questions, why come on talk shows? Audience makes a louder, oh. Alexandra raises her eyebrows. Alexandra, that's a great question. Joy smiles, sensing the tension. Joy. And Alexandra looks across the panel. Alexandra, because sometimes these conversations can actually be interesting. Audience claps. Sunny leans forward. Sunny, and sometimes they're not. Alexandra gives a small shrug. Alexandra, sometimes they're just the same conversation recycled over and over. Audience reacts again, louder this time. Whoopi glances between the panelists. Whoopi, okay. I feel like we're just getting into this. Sarah nods slowly. Sarah, yeah, and I think the conversation might get even more interesting after the break. Audience laughs nervously. Whoopi turns toward the camera. Whoopi, don't go anywhere. We're continuing this discussion with Alexandra Daddario when we come back. Audience applause continues as the camera fades out, and the tension at the table is very clearly still hanging in the air. Whoopi, welcome back, everyone. We're still here with Alexandra Daddario, and things are already heating up. Alexandra, we left off talking about those recurring questions and the way people reacted online. Let's dig a little deeper. Audience murmurs in anticipation. Alexandra, sure. I think it's important to remember that interviews are a two-way street. You don't just have to answer every question exactly as expected. Joy, I get that, but some viewers online felt you were almost confrontational, almost dismissive. Do you see it that way? Alexandra, I don't. I just speak honestly. If someone asks a question I find shallow or repetitive, I'm not going to pretend it's groundbreaking. Sunny, but then that's where the tension starts, right? Because the audience wants accessibility. They want someone relatable. If you push back too hard, people read it as rudeness. Alexandra, I think there's a fine line between rudeness and being clear about boundaries. Audience applauds lightly, some nodding. Sarah, I want to push back a little, Alexandra, if that's okay. Because some viewers said, well, if you don't like the questions, maybe this isn't the platform for you. Alexandra, I get it, but at the same time, if we're always just nice for the camera, what does that really teach anyone? It's performative politeness. Joy leans forward. Joy, performative politeness. Okay, I see that point. But the thing is, talk shows, interviews, they are partly about image. You can't totally separate yourself from that. Alexandra, of course not. I'm aware of that. But there's a difference between navigating image and being expected to answer every question with a smile, no matter how shallow it is. Audience murmurs, some cheers. Sunny, so are you saying the industry is sexist? Alexandra pauses, carefully. Alexandra, it's complicated. There's definitely a gendered aspect. Men often get to talk about craft, philosophy, or process. Women are often reduced to appearance or marketability. Audience claps loudly. Whoopi, that's a fair point. But some critics online said, well, everyone gets reduced to something at some point. Isn't this part of the job? Alexandra, yes, part of the job, maybe. But it shouldn't be the only part of the job. We should get credit for skill and effort as much as appearance. Sarah, I have to ask, some people online said you sounded ungrateful. Like you were dismissing fans who are curious about your life. Alexandra leans forward slightly, calm but firm. Alexandra, I'm not dismissing curiosity. I welcome it. But I don't think curiosity should be shallow or formulaic. There's a difference between being interested in someone's process versus asking the same question hundreds of times. Audience applause breaks out again. Joy, that's a good point. But let's get real here. Some people really felt attacked. They said your tone came off as defensive. Were you aware of that? Alexandra: Honestly? Not until I saw the responses. I wasn't thinking about tone. I was thinking about honesty. Sunny: But if you say something honestly and people perceive it as aggressive, isn't that a problem for how the message lands? Alexandra: Maybe. But shouldn't the message itself matter more than the packaging? Audience murmurs. Whoopi: Okay, so here's the tension. Some people online are saying, you're alienating your audience, and others are saying, finally, someone's speaking up. How do you handle that? Alexandra: I try not to let the extremes define me. If I'm being respectful and truthful, I'm okay with some people disagreeing. Sarah: But some viewers online reacted very personally. They said things like, she's rude to fans, or even criticized your fashion or smile. How does that feel? Alexandra takes a breath. Alexandra: It's uncomfortable. But the truth is, social media amplifies extremes. You see the loudest opinions, not the quiet ones that agree with you. Audience nods, some clapping. Joy: So is part of the frustration that people don't listen to the full context? Alexandra: Exactly. One sentence gets taken, looped, and turned into a headline that may not reflect what I actually meant. Sunny: But Alexandra, you did post a response online. And it was very direct. Did you expect that level of reaction? Alexandra: I didn't. I thought people would appreciate clarity, but of course it got blown up. That's the nature of the internet. Whoopi: And that's where things got interesting. Because after your response, the conversation got heated between fans and critics. Alexandra: Yeah. And I don't think it needed to be hostile. I just wanted the context to be clear. Sarah: But some people online argued that your approach wasn't friendly enough. They felt like it pushed people away. Alexandra smiles faintly. Alexandra: Sometimes honesty isn't always framed as friendly. And that's okay. Joy leans back, slightly exasperated but curious. Joy: So let me ask this. Do you think maybe part of this controversy comes from the expectation that women in Hollywood have to be endlessly likable? Alexandra: Absolutely. It's exhausting. And unfair. Men rarely have that expectation. Audience applauds again, louder this time. Sunny: I see that. But let's talk practical. When you walk into an interview, do you prepare for questions about looks and lifestyle, or do you just hope for better ones? Alexandra: I prepare for the usual ones because I know they're coming. But I also hope someone asks something substantive. That's the dream. Whoopi: And what happens when they don't? Alexandra shrugs, smiling wryly. Alexandra: Then you answer, but you redirect. You try to make it meaningful, even if the question isn't. Audience laughs. Sarah: That's smart. But it sounds like sometimes the redirection gets lost online. Alexandra: Exactly. That's the hardest part. The nuance disappears. And suddenly, it looks like anger or arrogance. Joy: I feel that. Social media loves a narrative that's easy to digest. Alexandra: Yes, and that's why I try to not overthink it. You can't control perception entirely. Sunny: But perception matters, Alexandra. This is the public stage. Alexandra: I know. And I try to balance honesty with approachability. But it's tricky. Audience claps again. Whoopi: I think we're starting to understand why people reacted so strongly. And I have a feeling we're just scratching the surface. Sarah: Yeah, because things online didn't stop. People started debating tone, intention, even personal motives. Alexandra: It's overwhelming sometimes, but it's part of being visible. You just have to navigate it as best you can. Joy: Well, we're definitely going to keep navigating this conversation after the break. And I have a feeling the audience will have a lot to say. Audience cheers and claps as the camera pans out slightly, the tension still very much alive, and the debate ready to heat up even further. Whoopi: Welcome back. Alexandra: We're diving right into it. Let's talk about how the internet reacted after your last interview. Some people said it was too much. Too blunt, too confrontational. What do you say to that? Alexandra: I think that's their opinion. I don't set out to be confrontational. I set out to be honest. And honesty can be uncomfortable. Joy, uncomfortable, sure, but some viewers felt like you were almost mocking them. They said your tone was dismissive. Alexandra, I would never mock anyone. If I come across that way, it's unintentional. I'm just pushing back against shallow assumptions. Sunny, but that's exactly what people are talking about. You're pushing back, and the audience perceives it as arrogance. Alexandra, I'm not arrogant. I'm frustrated with a system, not with people trying to engage. Sarah, but Alexandra, don't you think the way you express that frustration matters? Especially on live TV. It's not just words online anymore. Alexandra, I know. And I try to be aware. But I also refuse to sugarcoat everything just to make everyone comfortable. Whoopi, see, this is where it gets tricky. Because some people online said, she's entitled. She thinks she's above basic questions. Alexandra, that's not entitlement. That's asking for substance in the conversation. There's a difference. Joy, okay, but there are also people saying, well, if you don't like the spotlight, maybe step back. That's harsh, but it's out there. Alexandra, I love what I do. I love being visible. I just want it to be meaningful, not repetitive or trivialized. Sunny, so when someone criticizes your social media post about this, how do you handle it? Because it escalates quickly online. Alexandra, I ignore the extremes. I focus on the dialogue that matters. But it's hard when people twist your words. Sarah, twist your words, like how? Alexandra, for example, saying, I'm not here to make everyone comfortable, became, she hates her fans. Completely different. Audience murmurs in agreement. Whoopi, okay, that's a big leap online. But how do you respond in the moment? Alexandra, you clarify when you can. If not, you move on. You can't argue with every misinterpretation. Joy, some critics still called it defensive. Do you feel defensive? Alexandra, no. I feel protective of the work I do and how it's represented. Sunny, but do you realize how that sounds on live TV? People might take that as confrontation. Alexandra, I do. And I try to navigate that balance, but I won't compromise honesty for comfort. Sarah, and here's where it gets messy. Some people online also brought up your fashion choices, your smile, even your body language. Do you see how it's never just about the words? Alexandra, absolutely. And that's frustrating. Because suddenly, it's about superficial things rather than the conversation itself. Whoopi, I get that. But isn't that part of the territory when you're in the public eye? Alexandra, it is. But it shouldn't dominate every reaction. Substance should matter too. Joy, Alexandra, can I push back a little? Because some viewers felt your approach was dismissive of their curiosity. They genuinely want to connect, and it feels like you're shutting them out. Alexandra, I'm not shutting them out. I welcome curiosity. I just want it to be meaningful. I don't want to answer a question 100 times just because it's easy or expected. Sunny, but when you say it like that, it can come across as superiority. Alexandra, I don't see it that way. I see it as asking for better dialogue. Sarah, okay, but then people online see a clip, they don't see the nuance. They only see the edge. That's why reactions were so extreme. Audience murmurs and claps lightly. Whoopi, Alexandra, do you feel misunderstood by the public? Alexandra, sometimes yes. But I can't control perception. I can only control how I respond. Joy, so you accept that some people are always going to be critical? Alexandra, yes. That's inevitable. Sunny, even on a show like this? Alexandra, especially on a show like this. Because it's live, it's public, it's immediate. And yes, the audience reaction is part of it. Sarah, but do you worry about how it affects your career? Alexandra, I worry about my work, not the noise. If I'm proud of the work, I can handle criticism. Whoopi, let me ask you something, Alexandra. Because some viewers online felt like you were lashing out at the media in general. Was that your intention? Alexandra, not at all. I'm frustrated with shallow questions, not journalists. I respect the work, but I also have to respect myself. Joy, and that line is tricky because people online will frame it however they want. Alexandra, exactly. That's the challenge. Sunny, so what's your takeaway from this whole internet reaction? Alexandra, that honesty will always be misinterpreted sometimes. But I'd rather speak honestly than pretend for comfort. Sarah, and that's where people either love you or hate you. Audience claps louder. Whoopi, and that's the tension we see. Because this conversation isn't just about interviews. It's about expectations, perception, and how women navigate public spaces. Alexandra, exactly. And that's why it becomes so complicated. Joy, I think we're just scratching the surface here. And I feel like things are about to get even more interesting. Sunny, yeah, because the audience reactions online didn't stop, and neither did the debate. Alexandra, I know. And I have to be prepared for that. Sarah, well, we're going to continue this after the break. And I have a feeling some of the questions are about to hit even closer to home. Audience applause continues, some cheering, some murmuring, the tension thick in the studio as the panel leans in, ready for the next round of the conversation. Whoopi, welcome back. Alexandra, after that interview, the internet exploded. Some loved your honesty, others were critical. How did it feel? Alexandra, overwhelming, but also enlightening. It shows how polarized people are online. Joy, some viewers even criticized your tone, facial expressions, and fashion. Did that bother you? Alexandra, it's uncomfortable, but I focus on the fans and dialogue that matter, not the noise. Sunny, and the clips, the memes, the hashtags, did that add pressure? Alexandra, absolutely. It amplifies everything. But I try to focus on substance, not perception. Sarah, some online outlets framed it like a feud between you and the audience. Was that fair? Alexandra, not at all. I wanted discussion, not a feud. But headlines rarely capture nuance. Whoopi, do you feel misunderstood by the public? Alexandra, sometimes yes. But I control what I say, not how everyone interprets it. Joy, and did the backlash affect your professional life? Alexandra, not really. My work speaks for itself. I just focus on clarifying points when needed. Sunny, and looking forward, will this change how you do interviews? Alexandra, not fundamentally. I'll stay honest, advocate for meaningful questions, and be prepared for online reactions. Audience claps and cheers. Sarah, Alexandra, thank you for being candid today. This conversation matters. Alexandra, thank you. It's challenging, but rewarding to speak openly. Whoopi, to our viewers, share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Final Take Files for more real talk show stories. Moments like this are raw, authentic, and unfiltered, and your voice is part of the discussion too. Audience applause and cheers as the camera pans out, ending the segment with excitement, reflection, and lingering tension from the conversation. Make sure to subscribe Final Take Files for more videos.